Nobody speaks in relativistic terms all the time. That would be so inconsistent. Because if that was really the case, you can never correct a person about anything. And we're all correcting each other. We're canceling each other 24/7. The cancel culture proves we all believe in absolute standard. Well, it doesn't matter whether you knew it or not. Being a slave owner is wrong, canceled, right? That's an absolute statement of morality, isn't it? If we're truly a relativistic society, we shouldn't cancel a single person. Psalm 19, 1-4. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words, whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. And then later on in verse 6, he says, nothing is hidden from its heat. Creation itself is as if it speaks God. Even to a blind person will know God through creation because he adds nothing is hidden from his heat. They can still feel heat even if they don't see the sun. Everything, your senses from creation should all be testifying, telling you about a creator. Now, it might not lead to the Christian God or Jewish God, not that special revelation, right? But it will get to the point of God. There's no way you can look at creation and conclude that there is no God, in other words, according to Psalm 19. Romans 1:20, the Apostle Paul says, for God's invisible attributes, and notice what he emphasized, his eternal power, so not all of God's attributes, only certain ones. His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made so that they are without excuse. So the Apostle Paul says, creation reveals these two things about God so that nobody can have an excuse at the end of their life saying, God, you didn't reveal yourself to me. I just never had a chance to believe in you. He will say, you're living in it. If you just looked around you, if you looked at the animal kingdom, if you looked at yourself, if you looked at biology, if you looked at the stars, everything, my eternal power is a fingerprint. It's everywhere. And so is my divine nature. And so you can conclude God's power and that God exists from general revelation, according to Apostle Paul. So nobody is without excuse. There is no such thing as a person who is completely ignorant about God. In other words, there is no such thing as a person who's an atheist, according to Scripture. They might call themselves an atheist, but they aren't really atheists. Because here's why we know no one is really an atheist, because nobody talks as if they're truly an atheist. People all speak in absolute terms, even those who are relativists. Have you noticed that? People say, my truth, your truth, there's no such thing as truth. But when you get into the court of law, people tend to speak pretty truthfully. They will say that is wrong. That's an absolute statement. It is immoral that you allow this sex trafficking person to kidnap kids. You cannot make that statement because that's an absolute statement if you live in a moral relativistic society. Who says it's wrong? Do you see what the problem? Atheists don't speak like atheists when injustice happens to them. Fight for our rights. This isn't right. This happened at work. This happened to my kids. No, something should be done. What they are claiming is that there is a standard of justice that needs to be upheld, and what they're experiencing is unjust. But you cannot say that there's such thing as a justice apart from what? A creator who establishes an objective standard of justice. So everyone who says they're an atheist might say it, but in reality, they don't live like an atheist. Because they make absolute claims. They make moral claims at some point. They make truth claims. Nobody speaks in relativistic terms all the time. That would be so inconsistent. Because if that was really the case, you can never correct a person about anything. And we're all correcting each other. We're canceling each other 24/7. The cancel culture proves we all believe in absolute standard. Well, it doesn't matter whether you knew it or not. Being a slave owner is wrong, canceled, right? That's an absolute statement of morality, isn't it? If we're truly a relativistic society, we shouldn't cancel a single person, if you think about it. Does that make sense? The irony is that the people who are pro-cancel culture are also the ones who tend to be moral relativists. But if anything, they should be anti-cancel culture. Because who are you to say that Abraham Lincoln should have known better? Or who are you to say that Thomas Jefferson? Who are you to say the racist 50 years ago? There is no such term as racism is wrong if it's all relative. They can believe what they want to believe. If they want to think blacks are inferior to whites, so be it. If we don't want to believe, we're all, your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth. However, through creation itself, we already have a sense that there must be absolute things, absolute truths, because we have a sense of an absolute God. One of the reasons why Jesus was born during the time that he did is because it gave the maximal effect possible for any message to go out. Before this time, they didn't create the Roman roads, but the Roman roads allowed to connect societies together, and it is what connected the Roman Empire. The language of the Romans, as you know, Greek was their written language, which was a very precise language. And later on, it got, with Latin and Aramaic. And so what you see is that this is a language of academia, which is why the New Testament is written in Greek, because it's the most precise language during that time. Jesus was born during the time of the Roman Empire, which was when the world was the most interconnected at this point. If he came before the Roman Empire, his message would not have been dispersed as it did. There would have been no such thing as the Roman road, which will allow people to be missionaries later on, like the Apostle Paul. And so you start to see all these things. Wow, how convenient that Jesus was born during the perfect time for a message to explode and go out. And the Roman Empire was the main empire of the world. So if you're able to get the Roman Empire to get this message, what happens? The whole world gets this message. And that's exactly what happened 300 AD. What happened? Constantine became a Christian, made it. And then after that, what? It exploded because now it's everywhere. It wasn't just a small cult trying to survive. It became the main religion of the Western world, divine providence. And so what you start to see, if you look at history with the proper lens, you don't see things as coincidences anymore. You see evidences of God intervening through people throughout time for his will. For example, why did the Reformation happen when it did with Martin Luther? What predated right before the Reformation that allowed it to happen? You guys heard of Gutenberg? What did he do? He was the first one to what? Make the copy. The Reformation cannot happen until that happened first. Because how do you give copies of Scripture? Because one of the things that the Reformation said is that it shouldn't just be the papacy that has access to the Bible. Every person should be able to read the Bible. Until Martin Luther, you couldn't read the Bible. Because first of all, it was written all in Latin. Most people were illiterate. Very few knew Latin besides the priests. So Martin Luther was the first one to translate it in the common language of his people, which was German. And he worked with Gutenberg, who made copies of this and was able to disperse it. And then the Reformation, boom, happened. And after that, education started popping up because the Renaissance and Reformation gave birth to the universities. Coincidence? Right? So you start to see history is not, it's important to study because you're seeing the fingerprints of God happen in certain events for certain reasons because it's strategic in what he's trying to do in his mission.